We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
Thirteen of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore, seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
13 of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore, seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
13 of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later.
Tonight on Tower Talks, a civil discourse symposium on campus tackled questions like, should we strive for a colorblind America? And is 1619 or 1776 the true founding year of America? More on the discussions coming up. After much back and forth in the courts, a Texas law allowing state officials to arrest undocumented migrants is blocked again. We'll look at where the bill stands today. And finally, a topic closer to home, student housing. We'll sit down with our panel of student housing advocates and a professor to talk about housing around UT Austin and housing advocacy. All of this coming up on Tower Talks. Good evening and welcome to Tower Talks, the show where we take a closer look at the stories affecting Texans, Austinites, and students right here at UT Austin. I'm Medha Sarin, and tonight we have an expert panel lined up for you to talk about student housing. But before we get into that, there's a lot going on nationally, across the state, and right here on campus. UT held the Civil Discourse Symposium Thursday and Friday of last week. The symposium featured a series of 5 moderated debates and panels about civil issues like racism, the role of a university, and political ideologies. Ryan Streeter, Director of Research at the Civitas Institute, moderated the keynote debate titled, Is Liberalism Doomed?, featuring New York Times opinion writers Ross Douthat and Michelle Goldberg. Both speakers agreed that liberalism is declining, but Goldberg said she has hope for its survival because of the lack of good alternatives to liberalism. Douthat emphasized how the presence of liberalism differs around the globe and said that American society is generally liberal even in the face of governmental crises. Millions of Americans could lose home internet access if lawmakers don't act. According to the New York Times, the Affordable Connectivity Program is set to wind down starting early last month. As a pandemic-era infrastructure bill of $14.2 billion, the bill helped low-income households have discounts of up to $30 a month on their internet service bill and discounts of up to $75 a month for households living on eligible tribal lands. With no extension in place, remaining participants will only receive benefits through April. If lawmakers don't extend the bill, more than 23 million U.S. households risk being kicked off their internet plans or facing much higher costs for their internet bills. Starting in May of this year, internet service providers will have the option to provide partial discounts with the remaining funds in the program. Senate Bill 4, the Texas law being proposed that could allow police to arrest those suspected of illegally immigrating, was once again put on pause last Tuesday. Texas lawmakers first passed this bill last year, and it has been halted many times. The Supreme Court allowed the law to go into effect Tuesday, but a federal appeals court once again blocked the law while the U.S. Fifth Court of Appeals hears arguments from a lawsuit filed by El Paso County and immigrants advocates. The law continues to be controversial. Yesterday, more than 200 protesters marched through downtown Dallas in protest of the bill. After a narrow margin, the United States government avoids yet another shutdown. This past Saturday, March 23rd, President Biden signed a $1.2 trillion package deal that would help fund the government until the end of the fiscal year in September. The New York Times states that this package includes strengthening national security along the border, funding for the Departments of Agriculture, Justice, Energy, and more. Though it was a bipartisan vote, many Democrats and Republicans did not get all of what each wanted. Students have long complained about housing availability and living costs in and around UT Austin. Last month, the UT System Board of Regents approved negotiations for a new housing complex on campus that will add 800 more beds. West Campus has also seen new housing complexes over the past year. This growth comes amid concerns, though, with housing quality around construction delays, relocation, and windowless housing, among other issues. Earlier this month, some students created the University Tenants Union, designed to help students with their housing concerns. When we come back, we'll sit down with representatives from the union, UT for Housing Transparency, Texas Housers, and a professor from the School of Architecture to talk about housing around UT and affordable housing advocacy. Stay tuned.
In the day, rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
Of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV. Welcome back to Tower Talks. I'm here with our expert panel to discuss student housing. Starting on the far right, we have Professor Jake Wegmann. Professor Wegmann is an associate professor in community and regional planning at the School of Architecture. He has previously worked for profit and nonprofit organizations on affordable housing development in Denver and San Francisco. Next, we have Namratha Thrikutam. Namratha is one of the co-founders of the UT Tenants Union and a student intern for Texas Housers. As an intern, she researches and advances disaster recovery practices. Next, we have Kayla Quilantang. Kayla is the co-founder of the University Tenants Union and currently the Student Advocacy Director of the Architecture Student Council. She has also served as president of the council.
Kayla has previously contributed to successful efforts to ban windowless housing. And finally, on the far left, we have Isabel Webb Carey. Isabel is a co-founder of the UT Tenants Union and founder of UT for Housing Transparency. Thank you all for coming on and being on our panel here tonight. To start off the panel, I have one question for all of you guys. So we'll start with you, Isabel, and just go along the line. I understand some of you guys have had personal issues with finding housing. So to the extent that you all feel comfortable, can you each share your personal experiences with housing and how you got involved with housing research or advocacy? Starting with you, Isabel.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us on today. So my housing journey started with an experience I had in which I signed an apartment building expecting to be able to move in August. Like many other students, my move-in was delayed by many, many months, in which during those months I faced housing insecurity and realized just how detrimental that is to student success and student well-being, be that my mental health fell off a cliff. And I had a really tough semester. And in that, I founded UT for Housing Transparency, which was originally just a renters information page, but has since blossomed into a really beautiful and multidisciplinary collaboration with some of these lovely folks I have with me tonight. And that really got my career in housing advocacy going, and I'm really excited to be here tonight. Thank you for having us.
Hey, my name is Kayla. Thank you for having us as well. The way I got this journey started was as the previous president of the Architecture Student Council. I realized that there's a lot of unethical housing practices going on in West Campus and in student housing around UT in general. And I realized, especially through my experience as the president of Student Council, working with other student councils throughout the university, that as students, we actually have a lot of power to advocate for change. A lot of you probably already knew that the windowless housing issue was an epidemic, that students were facing mental health crises, physical health crises, but nothing was being done. And so in my position, I realized that through collaborating with Professor Juan Barreau, we could actually start a campaign to collaborate with City Council, and that kind of got me started on this journey. Since then, and with the success of that initiative, we've started the UT Tenants Union, and we've made this incredible team that we have today.
Yeah. My name is Namratha. Thank you for having us on as well. So I started working at Texas Housers, which is a low-income housing organization, about 2 years ago, and I worked pretty closely with a lot of vulnerable populations that dealt with various housing insecurity issues, a lot of low-income housing populations, and I learned a lot about what vulnerable populations look like. And jumped to a year later, I signed a lease in an apartment that I thought was going to be finished in August. It was not. I had to wait 2 extra months past the date I was supposed to move in. I was sleeping on friends' air mattresses. It was a really uncomfortable situation. I started to realize, this is what a vulnerable population looks like. It's students who don't really have other things to rely on. They don't have the continuity of a place to live in to rely on. We don't have the income or the ability to support ourselves sustainably. And so, vulnerable populations come in all kinds, and student populations are very vulnerable. And so that's sort of why I got involved in the windowless housing work that Kayla spearheaded. And that success, like she mentioned, has just spiraled over into this UT Tenants Union because, it's important for us to acknowledge this vulnerability and, change it, do something about it, and make something powerful.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. As the resident Gen Xer on the panel, all of my student housing experiences were in the 1990s, not in the 2020s, and that was a time when a lot of housing markets around the U.S. were just a lot less pressurized than they are now. And furthermore, I went to an undergrad institution where anyone who wanted could live in on-campus housing through their 4 years there, and that's what I did. So I just haven't experienced the things that you were all describing, but having done housing development, affordable and for-profit, and since then having become an academic researcher and studying these sorts of issues, I have a lot of empathy for young people today and the sorts of things that you all have to navigate, and I'm glad we're all here to come up with better ways to because there's got to be a better way to do it than what you're all experiencing.
Thank you all for sharing your journeys. We're going to get into these topics more in depth over the course of the night. But Namratha, I want to start with you. Tell me more about the UT Tenants Union that you guys have been working on. I know you had your first meeting in early March, I believe, to help people learn more about the group and get people to join. Tell me about it and like what is the purpose of this group? Why did you create it?
Yeah, for sure. So the reason we created it was pretty simple. Students need a voice, and we sort of have struggled to establish that voice, especially around housing equity issues in many years in the past few decades as housing has become more tight and more pressurized, because we're such a transient group of people. We're here for 4 years at most, and then we're gone. What do you do? Like, how do you create an organization or some kind of system that sustains past where you are? I mean, there are student orgs, but they can get a little complicated. There are offices through the university, and those are also difficult to regulate. And so we sort of started thinking after this success that we had with the ban on windowless housing, people do listen to students, and students do have ideas for how to make the neighborhood they live in better. We just don't have the medium through which to filter these ideas. And so the union really just came about of us being like, okay, people do want to do this work. People are excited about how to make a more livable neighborhood. Let's just give them the place to do it. Because we deserve the place to do it.
Isabel, I want to turn to you now. So I know that this union is 2-3 weeks old at this point, I guess. But talk to me about some of the things you guys have done so far, and as Namratha was alluding to, some of the goals and things you hope to achieve in the future.
Absolutely. It's funny because you say this union is 2 to 3 weeks old. In my mind and in my heart, this union's almost a year and a half old, because this all started in November 2022 with UT Housing Transparency, and has since grown into a collaboration. And I think one of the most meaningful moments was a town hall we organized last semester, in which we had over 60 students show up. There was free pizza, of course, but students showed up and shared and gave testimony, which is still being used to this day, to inform policy decisions taken at a city level. And moving forward, we want to work with that information that we've been given, straight from the source, which are the students. And going back to Noam's point, I think it's because we are trusted, because we are fellow students, and we share such a similar positionality, and there isn't this hierarchy of, power here. We are all going through the same thing, and so we can approach this problem as peers, and which was, the impetus for the union structure. And so we had our launch event, and getting people really excited. And I think one of the biggest things is that housing has made a name for itself. Partly due to Kayla's success with the Windowless Housing Initiative, but more broadly, people are expecting more. People realize that this is not how we should be living, this is not what we have to settle for, and that there is power in collective power.
So it's great that we're talking about, or we've been mentioning windowless housing, because I want to ask you about that now, Kayla. I know you and Isabel worked on the Windowless Housing Initiative. So tell me more about that issue, what the results have been like so far. And then in addition to that, I also want to know what concerns have students expressed to you about housing? What are the problems they see?
Definitely. I feel like at the heart of it, the Windowless Housing Initiative and the success and the entire process really serves as a precedent for how students, through the union and just through collective bargaining and just coming together, can advocate for the housing change that they seek. The Windowless Housing Initiative started as professor and architect Juan Moreau, his amazing advocacy work. There's a Plan 2 honors student, Rush Bozel, that had a research thesis that was about windowless bedrooms and the negative health effects of that. And from my end, I realized that there's a lot of power in just combining student voices. There's a quote from someone that kind of stays true to me today, which is just throughout Through a large diversity and a large majority of voices, we can advocate for change. So that was the approach with this initiative. We wrote a letter to City Council, specifically to Councilman Zoe Quadri, since his platform that he ran on was based on uplifting marginalized voices and tackling the housing crisis in Austin. And through this incredible social media success, we got 800 plus students throughout the university from a diversity of majors, but also from their parents, from their family members, and from architects and professionals throughout the city. Since then, we were able to get the resolution passed in collaboration with Zoe Quadri, and through our entire team's efforts, meetings with city staff, meetings with legal advice, and roundtables with the students, we were able to get that code change actually expedited for May 1st of this year rather than August or September of this year. Through those roundtables, which was to advocate for change with Councilman Zoe Quadri, we also discussed other housing issues. And like Isabel alluded to, that roundtable was a major eye-opener. We learned about how intense the issue of ADA accessibility is on West Campus, but also on campus. We learned about, of course, affordability issues, but also incredibly inhumane conditions that students are facing every day in their apartments, from mold to maintenance to being completely displaced from their homes.
I want to also open that question up to the rest of you guys on the panel. The students that you've talked to or the research that you've done, from that, what concerns have you found students expressing about housing?
Well, the rent is too darn high. I think I can say that on here. That's something you hear a lot, that although rents have leveled off in Austin, they shot up during the pandemic and they haven't come, all the way down. So that's just an ongoing struggle. A lot of students show up to campus and then they're faced with the decision about whether to take the financial hit and live close to campus, or else save money, maybe reduce their debt load, but then have to commute to campus, which diminishes their experience, makes it harder to go to professors' office hours or social events or all the things that make going to college. So, right there, that's a big one. But there's so many others, like some of the ones that Kayla was mentioning earlier.
I think another thing we've really heard from a lot of students, this is especially younger students, is there's this huge pressure in Austin to sign a lease as soon as you get here. I mean, you get here in August, you move into your dorm, you meet your roommate, and within a month you're expected to sign a lease to live in an apartment off campus if you want to move off campus. And I think that's just completely unrealistic to expect a student who has never read a lease on their own before, who has never lived probably away from their parents alone before, who's never ran a house, who's never had their own kitchen, they've never done any of these things before, and you expect them within a month to learn everything they need to know about renting an apartment. And we think that that's sort of ridiculous that you feel this kind of pressure to do that immediately. And students were trying to ask us for advice on how to do this and how to better understand their leases so they don't end up in situations like Isabel and I did, where you sign for an apartment that actually isn't done by the time that they say it's going to be done.
And just to second those points, what we want to drive home here is that's not normal. I mean, in the normal world,
In the real world, you don't sign a lease 9 months out of living there. That is completely unrealistic. I can speak from personal experience. I'm looking for a place to live next year in September, and I'm being laughed at, being told to come back in 2 months. This is just has been blown way out of proportion. I think also just what Kayla mentioned. There is a lack of maintenance and responsiveness to students' needs. You'll have, broken ceilings or doors that don't lock. And then there is just not enough institutional support from the university, from the college. I think something that we've talked about a lot is that the university has a duty to its students to prioritize and uplift the emotional and academic and overall well-being of its students. If it wants us to thrive and it wants us to continue being successful students, it has to, you know, almost look after us, and that has kind of been the deal. As Dr. Wegmann said, all students could live on campus at his university. Now, UT is, for so many reasons, it's a huge school that is infeasible, but they have displaced so much responsibility for student housing needs to the private market, and that is where we see these problems of, you know, the rent becoming too darn high, and students' needs being displaced to people who don't have our best interests at heart, because after all, profit at the end of the day is what they're seeking.
Just to continue off that question, how are all of these problems that you guys have talked about affecting students, from your personal experience or from, you know, talking to students? How's it affecting them? Another question for all of you guys.
We can say a lot about students' experiences purely from the testimonials that we've heard, even comments on our Instagram, especially with windowless bedrooms. Rush Bozale's research showed through the BBC Wellness Scale that it was unanimous. Anyone who was living in a bedroom without windows was having a worse social life, was having poorer physical health, was having a dysregulated circadian rhythm and sleep schedule, but also mental breakdowns, anxiety, depression. There were some comments and testimonials that were saying that students had to be put on medication because they were forced to live in a windowless bedroom for several months. And there's just a plethora of horrific stories that are similar to that.
And yeah, I would say students are being funneled towards certain projects. There are certain, you know, developers that are interested in, and all of them are interested in getting students to live at their properties. You know, they won't survive unless we're renting their apartments. But, you know, we're funneling students towards these apartments that don't have windows, that don't, you know, follow up on their maintenance requests, that rents are rising even though nothing is changing, you know, for us, for the apartment either, and it's taking a very negative impact on their health. And, you know, like Isabel said, it's just all profit driven at this point, and so students they're getting lost in the mix of all of this, and they can feel it. It's become overwhelming for them to even approach the housing market at this point.
For all of you guys, or whoever wants to pick it up, can you speak to why the situation is like this? Why, like, about this profit model for Austin housing complexes, and why the system is designed so that it really inconveniences students?
I think to piggyback a little off of what Isabel mentioned earlier, you know, the university has sort of shirked responsibility when it comes to the amount of housing stock that is available to students. You know, there is extensive housing stock available for freshmen. That's sort of what they sell to you when you come to UT, is that we have a place for you to live in your first year, to meet people, to have that social life, but then after that, you know, you go off to the private market and they don't talk to you after that. That's really about it. They just funnel you towards you know, being on mailing lists and being pushed into this private market, rather than trying to help you find the most cooperative housing for you, the most successful housing for you that'll help you focus on your education most.
And because it's not being surveyed by the university and students aren't being supported for their housing needs, the profit model in West Campus is actually very predatory, especially for marginalized students that have lesser economic capital. For instance, coming back to the windows bedroom example, bedrooms with windows were being advertised to students as bedrooms with a luxury edition, with an amenity price of $35, $40 a month. And because we are such a vulnerable population, and because there's such a rapid rush to sign the lease, students fall prey to that kind of marketing tactic. And smart housing units as well are often the ones that are the bedrooms without windows. And so not only is it incredibly unaffordable for most students, but it's also causing a greater economic gap between students and quality life.
And I think I would just add, we can't face reality. Austin has become the 10th biggest city in the US, and it has attracted a lot of investment, and a lot of people want to move here, and that supply and demand, well, it has pushed prices up.
And we know that yield star, and I'm sure Dr. Wegmann would know much more about this than I would, and is a better place to speak about this, but yield star is an algorithm which calculates how high they can push rent up to the maximum ceiling at which students are able to pay. And the thing is that UT is a socially, economically diverse campus, right? The point is that anyone who wants an education in Texas should be able to get it. But that does mean that you have some people who are able to pay these exorbitant prices, but you have others who are left having to take out loans and who are genuinely paying more to live near the university than they do for their college. Yeah. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Well, I feel like maybe someone should speak at least somewhat in favor of some of the housing system. You know, all the concerns that everyone has brought up are entirely valid and need to be addressed. But I think we could, you know, the question is, do we, you know, throw the entire system overboard or do we reform it? And I think there are a lot of very productive reforms that would make what we have function a lot better. Top of the list being just there should not be windowless bedrooms. I mean, that was a settled matter, you know, 120 years ago in a lot of, you know, cities around the world. No one in London or San Francisco or Madrid would dream for a minute that you should be able to build windowless bedrooms in the year 2020. So that's a real victory that that's being addressed, and it's a awful shame that so many buildings got built under the pre-existing rules, but at least the bleeding's going to stop. And so that's good. I think there are a lot of benefits that a lot of buildings have gone up in West Campus, which allows a lot of students who wouldn't otherwise be able to walk to campus. I think that's a tremendous quality of life. But I do share the critique that the university really did underinvest for many years in building on-campus housing. And even if there wasn't room on the 40 acres, the university has various land holdings. You look around, you see the intramural fields. Does it really need those enormous parking lots? You know, I question some of the land use decisions here and there. So I don't know, I guess to me I would say we need some reforms, but we also need to be cognizant of some of the benefits of what has happened, and I think, you know, get more of those and avoid some of the harms that have been described here.
And I will say, I mean, like the smart housing program, a great idea. It's a great program. The idea that, you know, buildings can subsidize their development by including more affordable units. That's a phenomenal idea. The program just needs to be maintained and it needs to be upkept. Now we're having smart housing units that have windowless bedrooms. You can't mix smart leases and other issues that students are facing that they've mentioned to us. And, you know, again, program is good. It's just the maintenance and the upkeep and taking care of it that now needs to happen.
Just to note, by the way, smart housing was actually done by the city of Austin. It wasn't an initiative taken by the university. But we do celebrate some of the moves the university has made, you know, buying up Dobie, 2400 Noises, and the recent grant by the board, which the Board of Regents has approved to increase housing stock. We do celebrate these things. We just want more of it and quickly.
And you're entirely right, too. You know, the city law that made the enormous growth in West Campus possible, that was passed back in 2004. That was a long time ago now. It's time for an update. There are a lot of new needs that today that were anticipated 20 years ago. You know, one of you pointed out that a lot of the sidewalks, where they even exist, are often impassable, and that just desperately needs attention now. You can't have a neighborhood that now has the density of, I don't know, some neighborhoods in Brooklyn or Queens that lacks functional sidewalks that are impassable on a wheelchair. So I think we need some updating. We need some, and a tenants union is just a perfect organization to help, you know, coordinate that and push for that.
And that is one of the things we are working closely with city councils to make happen, and make sure that student voices are included in the upcoming UNA reform. So and that stands for the University Neighborhood Overlay. So thank you very much for bringing that up, Dr. Wegmann.
Professor Wegmann, I have a question for you now. about your research. You previously worked in developing affordable housing in Denver and San Francisco. So I'm wondering if you have any insights into how affordable housing in Austin is, and how that compares to these other cities that you've worked in.
Yeah, I'd say Denver, you know, Denver is much more similar to Austin than San Francisco is. San Francisco is a place where it has become so incredibly difficult to build housing that that region's just, they're in a real pickle. I am not in any way downplaying the problems that we have here in Austin, but I think here we have at least the possibility of shoveling ourselves out of the hole, so to speak. I don't think we'll end up where San Francisco is, but that makes it all the more important to, you know, pursue all these various reforms that the other panelists have mentioned to keep things from getting worse. I'm cautiously optimistic that we can do it here.
And a follow-up question for you. You've studied how affordable housing intersects with real estate development and land use regulation. So to your knowledge, how does Austin's land use regulations and policies around land use and real estate compare to Denver and San Francisco?
I would say we compare poorly to Denver. Denver, in a long time ago, in 2010, overhauled the zoning for the entire city. And if you go there now, you can see it. Little pockets of development pop up in all kinds of different places. Here in Austin, we passed a citywide comprehensive plan called Imagine Austin in 2012. And then after you do that, you're supposed to then change the zoning that makes the plan come to life. And here we are 12 years later, and we just never did it. We were never able to do it. So we spent most of this whole last boom with a really outdated land development code here in Austin. And it, you know, things have gotten built. I don't mean to suggest that nothing has gotten built, but so much more could have been built. So many more things that we need could have been built in the right locations. I would point to West Campus as a rare example where Austin did consciously choose to allow a whole neighborhood to evolve in a dramatic way. But that's a very exceptional circumstance. That's one of the very few parts of the city where something like that has happened. So I think moving forward, we need to, you know, be more like Denver, do more of that, you know, thoughtful planning and rezoning to allow denser, more walkable housing to pop up in more parts of the city.
Switching gears a little bit, I'm going to come back to you, Kayla. You guys have talked earlier about how you feel the university is shirking responsibility and could be doing more. Tell me about what the administrative response has been from the university, the city council, just housing administration, everyone you've worked with. What has that response been to student housing concerns?
The administrative response from the university hasn't been as vocal as we wish that they would be. Interestingly enough, City Council has been working a lot closer and a lot more directly and promptly with us than our university administrators. However, there are so many passionate university faculty members, Dr. Wegmann being an example, and Professor Moreau being another example. And so we want to hopefully build a stronger relationship with the university, and City Council wants to build a stronger relationship with the university as well, so that this can be a collaborative approach to solving student housing needs. Because there's a lot that can be solved from just university funding, support, or just initiatives with UT's power that might not even be as effective with citywide policy.
And Namratha, I'm going to come to you now. You're also an intern with Texas Housers in addition to helping fund the UT Tenants Union. Can you talk to me in depth about the challenges that all of these groups that you're working with have faced in trying to improve housing conditions?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I mentioned at the beginning. We're a vulnerable population, and honestly it doesn't even really matter if you are a vulnerable population. There are landlords and managers and developers that just do not want to listen to their tenants because they can still keep getting their rent from you. In Texas, you're a state where all you have to do to not get evicted really is to just keep paying your rent, and the minute you stop doing that, that's when bad things can happen to you. And so as long as you keep paying your rent, you know, really, why do they need to listen to your concerns about maintenance? Why do they need to listen to your concerns about, you know, your lock's not working, your bathroom molding? And so we're really seeing that start to pile up. Developers are starting to take advantage of the fact that students need this housing, and I don't think they've started to realize that the script flips. They also need us in order to sustain these properties. They need us to continue leasing at these places. They need us to tell our friends to lease at these places, and, you know, our little siblings are the people who come to UT. And so I would say the challenges really have been that they haven't recognized that students do have a voice, and we do have power to, you know, say what is happening to us is wrong, to say that the treatment that we're getting is wrong. But, you know, that's going to change, and I think that like I mentioned, it definitely needs to be seen that they rely on us as much as we rely on them. They definitely need us to keep renting these properties, and we're not going to continue to keep renting at these properties if they don't address our maintenance concerns, if they don't address our affordability concerns, if they're not transparent about what their rent prices are. Yeah, things like that.
And Isabel, I'm going to come to you now and ask you about UT for housing transparency that you started last year. Can you tell me more about that, and also talk to me about the need for transparency in housing practices?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of going off Num's point, it's difficult and abnormal to expect tenants, to expect students specifically, to have to go to a leasing page, and have price unavailable, cool property to find out how much your apartment costs. And it's so disheartening when you know your price ceiling might be a couple hundred lower than what the asking price is. And I was really frustrated by this, and I know a lot of other students were. And so that was kind of the birth of UT for Housing Transparency, just wanting to get transparency about the prices, but then also the living conditions of these places. So I just scraped a bunch of information off the web and would post individual properties, and I had quite a few people interacting with the page, sharing their own experience, and that's when this really took off, and I realized that, as Noam said, we are vulnerable, but people care, and people want more, and people are being hurt by the system as it is right now. But then I realized that this could be so much more. The university has a role to play, but so do we as students. And it's already been mentioned, but part of the problem is that we have this institutional memory and institutional knowledge that we build up over 4 years, and it just cycles out. There's no institution which is keeping this, you know, knowledge created for the students by the students, and that is why UT for Housing Transparency, if you look it up today, it no longer exists, because as of about a month ago we turned it into the UT Tenants Union, and as Noam said beautifully earlier, this also brings a long-term vision to what I started in a fit of rage about 2 years ago.
Okay, one more question before we go to break. Professor Wegmann, I want to ask you, as someone who has researched housing in a couple different cities, this union, the UT Tenants Union, is going to be, I believe, the first student housing union at UT. So what effect or what impact do you think this kind of organization can have on UT and Austin as a whole?
Oh, I think they can have a lot of effect. You know, just what Isabel was saying earlier about the power of transparency. You know, we had some comments earlier about, you know, is it good that we have a private or capitalist or whatever you want to call it market for students? But the fact is, if we're going to have one, then we should have competition, and competition thrives on information. And what is anyone afraid of? Students should be able to comparison shop and get the best deal. And so right there, that's a tremendous service that they're going to be providing. But they can also, they can shame bad actors too. I think it's another very legitimate practice. If a lot of stories accumulate about a particular landlord or company that seems to be unusually not responsive to very reasonable requests to fix plumbing or to, address doors that don't lock, then if they can raise the temperature on that and get those actors to clean up their act, that's terrific too. And then still another way they can be tremendously helpful is they can help the new students who are streaming in every August. They can help educate them and make them savvier about their housing choices. So I just think this is a tremendous idea, and I really applaud, what Isabel and Kayla and the others are doing. So I think it's great.
Thank you, Professor Wegmann, sorry. When we come back, we'll continue to talk about student housing in Austin and the power an individual tenant has.
13 of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
13 of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns.
Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, we are joined by Professor Jake Wegmann, Namratha Thrikutam, Kayla Quilantang, and Isabel Webb Carey to discuss affordable housing and housing advocacy around UT Austin. Now we're going to move into talking about potential solutions to student housing issues as well as the power a tenant has. So, Namratha, I'm going to start with you. Based on your experiences with getting housing and what you've heard talking to other students, as we talked about earlier on the program, what kind of risks do students face when they sign a contract and have to commit to certain housing?
Yeah, I think it's mostly a lack of information. I think that a lot of these companies are thriving on the facts that, they can just tell you, no, trust us. You need to sign this now. You don't need to read the lease. They're all the same. It's going to be fine. And we don't know that much. I remember when I was a freshman, I didn't know that much. So when I signed at the apartment I did freshman year or first sophomore year, I didn't really spend too much time looking into it or thinking about it. And now looking back, I really wish I'd had someone to tell me, you know, read through your lease, really understand what it is you're signing on to, really look at all of your options, you know, like what is the competition, like Dr. Wegmann was saying, what is the best option for you to find housing. And so I think, yeah, definitely you do sign yourself on to this commitment that you don't fully understand until you move in the next year. And like we've already mentioned, that's 9 months out. We have to sign these leases 9 months out. And so what we're really hoping to do with this union is to amass really good, comprehensive knowledge about what it's like to sign a lease here. Convince people, you know, you don't have to be signing 9 months out. You don't have to be listening to these predatory landlords. You can do your own research. You can come to the union for help and, you know, make better informed decisions in, you know, better amounts of time.
Following up on that, I want to ask you, when a student has signed up for a contract, I know, of course, it's different depending on the contract, but typically how much power does a tenant have? And why would they have that amount of power?
Nothing. I mean, those are cookie-cutter contracts. You can't negotiate a thing about them. You can't change how much you're paying for rent. They'll just throw your lease out. They'll ask someone else to sign there because that's the problem. And we need to start taking advantage more, actually, of these kind of positions that we're in, that we can collectively hold back signing at some of these apartments. We can collectively say, no, we are not going to live at this apartment that continues to ignore our maintenance requests, that continues to put us through the things that we do. You don't get any power in that situation, in that last signing where you have to, you know, you say no, they'll move on and find another person. But if we all sort of agree that, you know, we're not going to live in these places, what are they going to do then? They have to listen to you then.
I also want to open that up and hear from the rest of you guys if you have any insights or ideas about like the risks students are facing and how much power they have, and this idea that Namratha was talking about.
I feel like building off of Num's points, we have so much power as a collective, as a large, diverse majority of students and tenants, but we also have a lot of tenants' rights that we can help educate students about. We met with BOSTA recently and we learned about several rights that tenants have, one of the main ones being the right to repairs. That's about the health and safety of residents, and that's something that many students don't know about, and that's something that not a lot of developers or landlords are letting their tenants know about. But for instance, a broken elevator that hasn't been repaired for weeks or months is extremely harmful for people who are mobily disabled, people who need the elevator because they're in a wheelchair, for instance. Mold is another extreme example of someone's health being put at risk, and that's a tenant right that can be used as leverage with developers and landlords. And so in addition to educating students about what their housing options are, about lease comprehension, we can also educate students about their tenants' rights, and that's one of the main goals of the union as well.
And Isabel, coming to you now, I know earlier we talked about the concerns and then we also talked about some solutions, but I want to just pose this question to you now. To your knowledge, what has UT, Austin, local complexes, housing complexes done to improve housing for students?
So the city has been responsive, and they've been a huge help and support to all of us, and me personally. They know what they're doing, and so they've direct funds available at the university. They're called emergency funds, but rent is explicitly one of the uses that is disallowed. You are not allowed to use emergency funds to cover your rent. And that's funny because that's one of the most frequent, most common emergencies you might have, except for maybe medical. And so the idea that the university is withholding funds and continues to have this attitude of not my problem for the health, well-being and safety of its students is completely ridiculous. And so I want more action, I want more, and I think we are demanding more.
Professor Wegmann, I want to come to you now. So for problems with housing in Austin, can you tell me about some of the solutions that you've seen Austin doing, and if there aren't solutions that you're seeing, like what are some ideas that you have that you think would be good solutions to put in place?
Well, we don't have 3 hours. And I guess I would say, I think of housing unaffordability as something like 7 or 8 different problems that are all related to each other but are distinct. And student housing is one of those. And then another one is homelessness, and another one is people who can't buy, their first house, and on and on and on it goes. But in the student housing area, one thing I would like to see is I would like to see more neighborhoods opened up to the UNO treatment, to the West Campus treatment. And to me, a very obvious place to do that would be the neighborhood that is immediately to the south across MLK. It's that area, sometimes it's called Judges Hill, but it has a lot of just oddly underused land. It's in an amazing location, has terrific transit service, it's walkable to campus, and there should be more housing there. So that would be one thing I would look to. I completely agree with Isabel. I would like to see the university involved more. I'd like to see the university step up to the plate. The fact is, this is a top national and even global university, and we have ambitions of moving further up the rankings. And to do that, we're not at the point anymore where we can just assume that housing just takes care of itself. Maybe that could fly in 1998 in Austin, but it can't anymore. Austin's got too expensive for that. Our ability to recruit the top minds, to our student body depends on offering more of them more supports and help. So that might mean, more support of the university to individual students. It might mean the university partnering with private developers. This has happened in other places in the United States. My fantasy is, let's say UT partners with a private developer and to build a new complex in West Campus where half of the apartments are reserved for and affordable to first-gen students, coming to UT, for example. So I think there are so many more things that could happen. I think the city, like some of the others mentioned, the city is very engaged in housing affordability issues. I think they're doing a lot. Will they all work? I don't know. We'll see. They're trying to fix that zoning issue that I spoke of earlier, but it's really tough sledding. So I think we have reason to believe that we could see progress along multiple fronts in coming years. But, everyone's got to pitch in.
Okay, and Kayla, I want to come to you now. We have heard a lot over the course of this hour about the tenants union and what you guys are doing, but talk to me about the potential benefits or what students might expect from joining the union, since the idea of joining a union might be scary.
Definitely. The windowless housing initiative really opened my eyes and a lot of students' eyes to the power of cross-collaboration, not only within the university from those of us of different majors, different talents and specialties, which is also a very unique environment. Although we are a transient population, it's a rare environment where we have specialties from different disciplines and different career aspirations that can be very fruitful in collaboration. But also collaborating outside of the university with organizations throughout the city. We were able to be so successful with that windowless housing initiative because we collaborated with Texas Housers, a nonprofit that knows a lot about tenants' rights and advocacy and how to form a union. We collaborated with AIA Austin, the architecture professional organization, where they have experience with writing code and ethical design practices. We collaborated with city council and staff and even sustainability consultants, like generally professionals that were passionate about joining these housing advocacy causes. So for any student that is interested in joining the union, we can be a part of a cross-collaborative movement within the university, but also citywide. And that makes these initiatives that are so difficult as a vulnerable individual really tangible and possible, and also a lot more motivating because you're joining with other passionate individuals, whether they're a city councilor or just your friend and roommate.
Thank you, Kayla. So now we are almost at the end of our panel. I have one more question for all of you guys, and we'll start with Isabel and go down the line. I want you guys to each share one piece of advice for students to help them in navigating the housing selection process. So maybe like something they should keep in mind with their contracts, or like a way to find housing. Just one piece of advice that can help them in the housing process. And we'll start with you, Isabel.
I'll start with housing is a human right, and what can I say? There are resources, and other students are the real resources. People who are older than you and have that generational wisdom of how to go about this process, what traps not to fall into. So reach out and don't do it alone, because alone you are vulnerable.
Very similar advice. Don't do it alone. I mean, a lot of us have had that experience. I myself, in freshman and sophomore year, went alone or with a friend to these different apartments and just asked them for their prices, and they told me things like windows are a luxury and an amenity, and it's a great deal for you to save $35 a month. And so instead of just going about it alone and isolated, talk to your friends, talk to your upperclassmen, and through joining the union or even just coming to these meetings, you'll have a great community to learn from. You can have small talk with about the affordable housing options or the equitable and livable housing options in West Campus through our community if you can't find your own.
Yeah, I would just say, to add on to that, ask questions. I mean, obviously, you know, stick with friends, go to communities, come to the union, ask questions of us, you know, ask questions of even the apartments that you go visit, ask them questions that might make them uncomfortable. They might give you an honest answer, who knows. But really just keep your eyes open and don't take what people tell you for face value when it comes to the housing market. And again, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to answer your questions as best as we can.
And realizing that I haven't personally experienced these issues like the rest of you have, but I guess the two things I would say are join the union. And the other thing I would say is, if someone wants you to sign something in a hurry, then just don't do it. Just walk away. Wait until you can take your time and think about it and deliberate about it. There's no reason for someone to, you know, pressure you into signing something on the spot that you're not comfortable with.
Really great, empathetic advice. Thank you guys all so much for coming onto this panel tonight and sharing your time with me and with our viewers. Tune in next week to hear about the intersection of social media and politics as major cases move through the Supreme Court and bills move through Congress. Be sure to follow us on social media at TSTV Tower Talks, on X, formerly Twitter, and at Tower Talks TSTV on Instagram. From all of us here in the studio, thank you for joining us this evening, and good night.
We got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that